Welcome back to this module on enhancing effectiveness in academic mentoring. This three-part series was intended to equip you with the knowledge, skills, and sensibilities to be the most effective mentor you can be in the academic setting. In part 1 and part 2, we explored various tenets and components of mentorship, including definitions, particularly in the context of these academic settings, exploring the benefits but also considering some barriers to mentoring, and exploring how frameworks and functions can be utilized to enhance our own practice. In today's session, participants will be able to understand various roles of mentors, assess their own mentoring practice, and developing the components of a mentoring philosophy. I'll ask a series of questions. If you're watching this video with a colleague, you could pause and share your thoughts. The roadmap for this three-part series is intended to do all of these particular things, and we land here with this assessing mentoring practice. It ties explicitly into part 2, where I introduced this self-assessment exercise by Lee et al. It's intended to help you reflect on your own mentoring practices by lumping and delineate mentoring roles into these 10 different domains. I ask you to apply your learning, thinking about these particular domains in terms of your own practice or experiences that you've had with a mentor. And then I ask you to identify intentionally the ways that you may support mentees in each of these particular domains. How often do you celebrate their success? How often do you introduce mentees to various networks? How often do you set up your mentees for a path of independence? In some ways, you may be successful in domains. In other ways, you may have areas of improvement. And that's what a self-reflective tool can help you identify. When you think about that and you think about your role as a teacher, you may be wondering, why are we including mentorship explicitly in this program on developing effective teaching and learning practice? Well, when you imagine all of the various roles that you play as a teacher, those include being a facilitator, a role model, information provider, resource developer, planner, and assessor. And those explicitly include mentorship roles. So in the classroom, in the development of your syllabus, you're thinking about your role as a mentor in addition to being these other various functions. So your role as a mentor includes what happens in the classroom, but also what happens outside of the classroom. And roles of mentorship can come in a number of different forms or fashions. I'll just identify a few here to delineate and illuminate the ways that we engage with our learners. You may serve the role of an advisor, providing advice, guidance, or feedback, sharing your own experience and expertise as appropriate, acting as a sounding board for ideas and action plans. You may also play the role of a tutor. A mentor is required to give different but specific kinds of feedback, and whenever that situation demands it. So when appropriate, you may be challenging mentees to think through other strategies or outcomes in order to make informed choices, helping the mentees refine their analytical skills through constructively challenging them. You may serve the role of a supporter, encouraging, prompting your mentees to be better versions of themselves, sponsoring them, introducing them to ideas, to conferences, to colleagues, to networks, and thinking about the ways that you can lift them up and put them in a successful way on their course trajectory. And then you may be a role model, recognizing that your learners are looking to you as a good example of how to be both an instructor, clinical provider, mentor, and whatnot. So these various roles can, in some ways, support one another, but ultimately can also be conflicting. So setting expectations early on for what your mentee needs and the kind of mentorship that you'll provide can set them up for satisfaction and expectation alignment. So I include this as just one additional way to imagine your mentoring relationship, but thinking about how you can articulate your expectations so that you, as either a coach, a guardian, a counselor, a networker, whatever terms you'd like to use, actually align and find areas of mutual satisfaction with your mentees. If you think about this as an iterative process in a life cycle, you can imagine that you may be paired with a learner, and the first step is to agree upon your goals and your expectations. That will help you as you prepare your mentees for success, you keep them engaged and networked, and you also assess their own outcomes and how the communication has gone. And this is a life cycle that repeats itself and becomes more nuanced and hopefully more successful with time. One of the ways that you can articulate expectations is to create a mentoring philosophy. This is something that can help guide your approach to mentoring. When you use it with mentees, it can help them better understand how you approach the mentoring relationship and whether or not that's a good fit for them. So as we think about doing this today, you can use these tools as you leave this module and develop the components of your own mentoring philosophy. A mentoring philosophy is a statement that explains and also justifies the ways you approach personal and professional relationships with students as you guide their development. It's really a way to incorporate your value statement, your approaches, set expectations that are appropriate for a successful mentoring relationship for you. It will look different than your colleagues' mentoring philosophies, and that's okay. Each one of you is informed by your own distinct set of experiences, values, and goals. So when we think about a statement of teaching philosophy, it's a brief summary of these values and principles and your approaches, but it's not your CV, your syllabus, something that's vague or unclear. It's intended to be a clarifying statement to guide this relationship. So there's some common components of mentoring philosophy that you can incorporate as you begin to draft out your own. There's a personal approach that's incorporated, overall goals, personal beliefs, and challenges and barriers. Remember that, as I mentioned, every mentoring philosophy will be unique to a mentor's own experiences, beliefs, and context, and will often change over time. I often will revisit my mentoring philosophy and tweak it as time has changed, different ways, different attitudes that I have for the mentoring relationship. So let's think about some specific components and how you can build those into your philosophy. One is a personal approach. What is your personal approach to mentoring? Why did you choose that approach? So one example would be that my personal approach to mentoring is flexible. With some mentees, I'm hands-on. With other mentees, I'm hands-off. So I choose this approach because I believe that every mentee has distinct needs and requires varying degrees of guidance. You may have a very different approach. Maybe it's not flexible. Maybe it's a different kind of strategy, and illuminating that for your mentees helps them to know how to work with you and how to align to those expectations. Mentoring philosophy components can also include overall goals. What do you have for those goals as you as a mentor? So my overall goal as a mentor is to provide the support necessary for my mentees to flourish professionally and academically. So I choose that goal because it's the responsibility of the mentee to define what professional and academic success is for them personally, and I support them in reaching those goals. Another component is your personal beliefs and value systems. So my personal philosophy is to treat people with respect, regardless of their background, and how that informs our mentoring relationship. So it may also be informed by what's different. So my personal philosophy is to go out of my way to assist others, and it must be on hold in certain mentoring situations, as the mentee must learn to do it for themselves. So building in your values, both things that are similar to your philosophies and beliefs, and how those may differ in your mentoring philosophy will be important. Thinking about how you're setting your mentees up for independence and success may challenge and inform what you include as your value statement in your mentoring philosophy. Also, including barriers and challenges can be helpful in a mentoring philosophy. How do you personally identify those? Some examples may be lack of communication, transparency and honesty, failure to clearly define roles and responsibilities. So maybe in your mentoring philosophy, you articulate what's most important to you. That clear, open lines of communication are vital as a part of your mentoring relationship. That you expect your mentees to be honest, and in return, you're honest with them. Those would be examples of some of the challenges that we often see in the mentoring relationship being explored and exposed in a mentoring philosophy, so that expectations are set from the beginning and set up for a successful mentoring relationship. If we think about applying these things in practice, brainstorm what your own mentoring philosophy might include. Share what you've written with a partner. Get feedback from them. What would they include in a mentoring philosophy? How might that shape your own in terms of how you further hone and develop that? Once you have a mentoring philosophy, you're in a very good position to expand that, to hone it, to think about your teaching philosophy, even your leadership philosophy. You just shift the focus. You don't have to do that in isolation. Just like with each module in this course, you can learn from the greater literature around. Entering mentoring is a fantastic way to draw from existing curriculum as you hone these particular principles and values. There are characteristics of effective mentoring programs that are larger and broader than just this module, but they address gaps in traditional mentoring models, especially those that we may be familiar with from our own training. It talks about relevant and neglected issues, like this divide that may emerge when you don't discuss expectations in the beginning of your relationship. These programs will often advocate for multiple mentors. You're doing this as mentoring teams, as I described in part 1. Emphasizing confidentiality and positive interaction, as we've described through each of the parts of this module. And then continuing this over time, building a relationship that's predicated on trust and relationships. This module, the last one of this series, is really intended to help you understand various roles of mentors, assess your own mentoring practice, and develop a mentoring philosophy. So this leads us to a teaching toolkit. What if this session did you identify as something you'd like to incorporate in your own mentoring practice? How might one of these tools inform your mentoring philosophy? And what's an example of how that could be used concretely in the classroom or outside the classroom? These are particular tools as you continue to grow and build your own. So by the end of this program, you'll have a very effective list of things you can start utilizing immediately. We'll see you in the next module as we continue to explore and grow your skills as a teacher, a mentor, and a leader. Thank you.